In ancient Thrace, among the majestic mountains and forests, Orpheus was born, the son of Calliope, the muse of epic poetry, and, according to some versions, the god Apollo. Orpheus was renowned for his incredible skill in playing the lyre. His music was so enchanting that even wild animals would fall silent, and birds would sing in rhythm to his melodies. Somehow, Orpheus fell in love with a woman named Eurydice. They were married, but the wedding was overshadowed by black, oily smoke from the candles and lamps. They looked at one another and said, "This is a bad omen," and they were right to worry. The next morning, Eurydice woke up early. She got out of the bed where Orpheus was still sleeping. She threw on her clothes and went for a walk. The dawn was already approaching. On a stone high above, a snake woke up. It slithered through the grass when Eurydice, walking barefoot across the meadow, accidentally encountered it. It struck its poisonous fangs into her ankle. The poison immediately entered her bloodstream. Crying out, she fell to the ground. When Orpheus found her, she was already dead and cold. He lifted her into his arms and carried her home, his face wet with tears. When the funeral was over, Orpheus lifted his lyre and set off on a journey. He traveled across land and sea until he reached a dark cave. He crawled through twisting tunnels, left and right, and walked into the darkness. Eventually, he reached the edge of a black, oily river, and across it, he saw the shadows of lands he sought to reach. He stood on the threshold of the land of the dead. Orpheus stared across the water, and in his thoughts, there was only Eurydice. How could she be in that strange, dark country? Suddenly there was barking, then a deep growl. From the shadows came a great three-headed dog, Cerberus, guardian of the riverbank. Orpheus lifted his lyre to his shoulder and played. So beautiful was his music that the beast wagged its tail and closed its 6 red eyes. The music carried over the water and reached the ears of Charon, the boatman. He began to row toward the sound. Orpheus never stopped playing. He stepped into the boat, and the old ferryman pushed off the shore and carried him across. When they reached the other side, Orpheus, still playing, stepped out and went forward into the dark. He entered the hall. At the far end stood 2 thrones. On one sat the Lord of the Dead himself, Hades, with eyes as deep as open graves. Beside him sat his wife, the beautiful Persephone. Orpheus, still playing, approached the thrones. He stood before the gods, met their gaze and sang, "We mortals are born to sorrow. Even the sparrow and stream know more grief than the deathless gods. But even you, Hades, have felt love's sting, the ache when Persephone is gone. Imagine her face turned to dust. That is how we live. I beg you, give me back my Eurydice." There was silence. Then Persephone turned to Hades, her face streaked with silver tears, and Hades looked upon his wife. He breathed and said, "Call the 3 fates." They brought him the 3 sisters, one who spun the thread of life, one who measured it, and one who cut it. Hades looked at the wrinkled, leathery face of the third. "Find the severed thread of Eurydice's life," he said, "and tie it together again." The third sister bowed to the god. Then Hades spoke to Orpheus. "Go, leave my palace, leave my realm, and she will follow. But do not look back. Do not turn your head until sunlight touches your face." Orpheus bowed. He turned and left the palace. He passed through the shadowed land and came to the river's edge. Charon was waiting. He stepped into the boat. When they reached the other side, Orpheus stepped out, and behind him came soft footsteps. But he did not turn. He walked on, and after a time he thought he heard the swish of a branch. At moments he felt her breath on his neck, but he kept his eyes ahead. He passed through the stone tunnel, and at last he came out of the cave and breathed the sweet air of the living world. Soon, he thought, the dawn would come and sunlight would touch his face. But as Eurydice followed Orpheus, she stumbled on a stone and fell. Orpheus heard her fall, and without thinking, he turned to catch her in his arms. He meant only to break her fall, and for a moment he saw her face, pale beneath the silver stars, but his hands closed on emptiness. She was gone. In the land of many guests, the third fate had cut her thread again, and this time it could not be mended. Orpheus turned, ran back into the cave, into the dark, until he reached the edge of the black, oily water. He called out her name, but there was no answer. Cerberus came again, growling and snapping at the air around his fingers, and Orpheus knew there would be no return to the land of the dead. So he came back to the world of the living and gave himself to music, which grew even more beautiful, laced with a silver thread of sorrow. And Orpheus never saw Eurydice again. Not ever. At least, not in this world.